What happens when a single act of prejudice, a moment of unbridled arrogance in the sky, collides with a force so powerful it can erase a company from existence? This isn't a story about a complaint filed or a lawsuit won. This is the story of Dr. Alani and Dr. Amara Sterling, brilliant twin sisters who were publicly humiliated and ejected from their first-class seats. It's the story of a flight attendant whose bigotry sealed her fate, and a CEO whose empire crumbled before he even finished his morning coffee. And it's the story of one phone call, a single, quiet call that triggered a corporate cataclysm, shutting down an entire airline in a matter of days. Stick with me as we unravel how two women, a father's love, and the swift, brutal hand of karma brought an airline to its knees. Before we begin, comment where you are watching from today, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Now, let's get into it. The air in the Aura Wings International First Class Lounge at JFK was a carefully curated symphony of privilege. It smelled of expensive leather, freshly brewed espresso, and the faint, clean scent of money. For Dr. Alani Sterling and her twin sister, Dr. Amara Sterling, it was simply a comfortable place to wait. They weren't tourists on a lucky upgrade. They were seasoned travelers who had earned their place in the world and every comfort that came with it. At 29, the Sterling twins were a study in coordinated contrast. Both possessed a striking beauty, with intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing, but their energy was different. Alani, a rising star in neurosurgery, had a presence that crackled with contained intensity. Her hands, destined for the delicate architecture of the human brain, were never truly still. She was the talker, the challenger, the one who met the world head-on. Amara, on the other hand, was the calm center of their shared universe. An astrophysicist whose work on exoplanetary atmospheres was already being cited in major journals, she moved with a quiet, deliberate grace. Where Alani saw people, Amara saw systems, patterns, and the elegant, silent mathematics that governed everything from a star's collapse to the subtle power dynamics in a room like this. They were flying to Florence, Italy. It wasn't a vacation in the traditional sense, but a surprise for their father, Marcus Sterling, on his 60th birthday. He thought they were both tied up with work, Alani with a complex craniotomy, and Amara with a telescope allocation proposal. The deception had been Amara's idea, a complex ballet of rescheduled meetings and carefully worded emails, and Alani had executed it with theatrical flair. "He's going to be floored," Alani whispered, a grin playing on her lips as she scrolled through a medical journal on her tablet. "He'll pretend to be stern, you know. Ask us if we're being responsible. But his eyes will give him away." Amara smiled, taking a sip of her sparkling water. Dad's tells are legendary. The left eyebrow twitch means he's genuinely surprised. The slight clearing of the throat means he's moved. If we get both, we've won the birthday. Their tickets, seats 1A and 1C on Aura Wings Flight 77, had cost a small fortune. But Aura Wings was supposed to be the pinnacle of luxury air travel. A boutique airline that had recently been acquired by the formidable private equity firm, Orion Capital Group. It promised an experience of unparalleled exclusivity. Its slogan, "Arrive before you depart," was plastered on every polished surface. The new CEO, a man named Richard Davenport, had been on a media blitz, promising a revolution in bespoke air travel. For the Sterling sisters, who valued efficiency and comfort above all else, it seemed the logical choice. They had worked tirelessly for years, sacrificing nights and weekends to reach the apex of their respective fields. They were the daughters of Marcus Sterling, a man who had built a global logistics empire from nothing. But he had instilled in them a ferocious work ethic. He never handed them anything. Instead, he gave them the greatest gift of all, the unwavering belief that they belonged in any room they chose to enter. "Boarding for Flight 77 to Florence will now commence for our first-class passengers," a disembodied voice chimed, smooth as silk. Alani snapped her tablet shut. "Showtime." Amara nodded, her calm demeanor a perfect foil to her sister's excitement. They gathered their carry-on bags, a sleek leather briefcase for Alani, a sturdy, practical backpack for Amara, and joined the short, privileged queue at the gate. They presented their boarding passes, received polite nods from the gate agents, and walked down the jet bridge, the anticipation of surprising their father bubbling between them. Stepping onto the aircraft felt like entering a private club. The lighting was soft, the color palette a sophisticated blend of charcoal gray and brushed bronze. The first-class cabin was an intimate space with only 8 pod-like suites, each a cocoon of privacy and luxury. And waiting to greet them, standing with a posture of rigid authority, was the lead flight attendant. Her name tag read Brenda. She was a woman in her late 50s with a helmet of perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that was technically perfect but reached nowhere near her eyes. It was a smile designed to be a barrier, not a welcome. As the Sterling sisters approached, Brenda's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive sweep over them. They were dressed in expensive, comfortable travel wear, cashmere joggers, silk blouses, designer sneakers. But on them, Brenda's gaze seemed to register it as something else, something out of place. "Good morning," Alani said warmly, holding up her boarding pass for 1A. Brenda's eyes flickered to the ticket, then back to their faces. The practiced smile returned, but it was now laced with something sharp and condescending. "Welcome aboard. Your seats are just there." She gestured vaguely, her tone suggesting she was giving directions to a public bathroom rather than a $10,000 suite. The sisters exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance. It was a look they had perfected over a lifetime of navigating spaces where their presence was questioned. It said, "Here we go." They settled into their seats, the supple leather sighing under them. The suites were impressive, with personal minibars, large entertainment screens, and amenity kits from a luxury French brand. But the beautiful surroundings couldn't erase the sour taste of that first interaction. A subtle friction had been introduced into the pristine atmosphere. A tiny gear, grinding where everything else was smooth. And in the silent, complex system of human interaction, Amara knew that even the smallest friction left unchecked could lead to a catastrophic failure. She just had no idea how catastrophic it was about to become. The first 15 minutes were a masterclass in passive aggression. While Brenda offered effusive greetings and glasses of vintage champagne to the other 4 passengers who trickled into the first-class cabin, a wealthy-looking older white couple and 2 businessmen in sharp suits, she seemed to render Alani and Amara invisible. She bustled past them, her movements sharp and efficient, her attention meticulously directed everywhere but at seats 1A and 1C. Alani, never one to tolerate being ignored, finally caught her eye. "Excuse me? We were missed for the pre-departure beverage service." Her voice was polite but firm, the voice of a surgeon who expected to be heard. Brenda stopped, turning slowly. Her smile was gone, replaced by a look of strained patience. "Of course, what would you like?" The question was clipped, perfunctory. "I'll have the champagne, please," Alani said. "And you?" Brenda asked, looking at Amara. "Just sparkling water with lime, thank you." Amara replied quietly, her eyes focused on the flight attendant, observing, analyzing. Brenda returned moments later. She placed Alani's champagne on the console with a little more force than necessary, causing a bit to slosh over the rim. She then handed Amara her water, but there was no lime. When Amara politely pointed this out, Brenda sighed dramatically. "We're in the middle of boarding. I'll get it when I can." She turned and walked away before Amara could respond. The older man in 2B, a portly gentleman named Mr. Abernathy, watched the exchange with a slight frown. He leaned over to his wife and whispered something, his disapproval clear. Alani's knuckles were white where she gripped her phone. "Did you see that? When she can? There are 6 of us in this cabin." "Let it go, Lonnie," Amara murmured, her gaze fixed on the safety card. "She's showing her character. Let's not let her dictate ours." But Brenda wasn't finished. As the final passengers boarded and the cabin door was about to be closed, she made her way back to the sisters. This time, she wasn't carrying drinks. She was holding a tablet, and her face was a mask of official feigned concern. "Ladies, I'm afraid I have to see your boarding passes again, she said, her voice loud enough for the entire small cabin to hear. Alani's head snapped up. We showed them at the gate, and you looked at mine when we boarded. It's a routine security check, Brenda said, the lie transparent. There appears to be a discrepancy with the seat manifest. I need to verify you're in the correct assigned seats. The implication was as subtle as a sledgehammer. You don't belong here. You must be in the wrong place. The other passengers shifted uncomfortably. The two businessmen buried their noses in their laptops, suddenly fascinated by spreadsheets. Mr. Abernathy, however, was now watching Brenda with open hostility. Amara, ever the strategist, knew that escalating would only give Brenda the ammunition she wanted. Calmly, she retrieved their digital boarding passes on her phone and held the screen out. Alani, simmering with a rage that was threatening to boil over, did the same. Brenda squinted at the screens for an unnecessarily long time. Sterling, she mumbled, as if the name itself was a puzzle. She typed something into her tablet. This is very strange. The system is showing these seats as blocked for Premier Tier frequent flyers. We are Premier Tier, Alani said, her voice dangerously low. Our father has had an exclusive account with this airline for over a decade. Lots of people say that, dear, Brenda replied with a saccharine smile. The word dear was a deliberate, patronizing jab. This was the breaking point. Alani stood up, her 5'8" frame seeming to tower over the flight attendant in the confined space. Don't you dear me. What exactly is the problem here? Are you suggesting these tickets aren't legitimate? I'm just trying to do my job, Brenda said, taking a step back, her voice now adopting a tone of wounded victimhood. There's no need to be aggressive. If you can't remain calm, I'll have to call the captain. Call him, Alani shot back. Call the whole damn airline. We paid for these seats and we are not moving. The curtain to the cockpit parted, and the captain, a man named Robert Miller, stepped into the cabin, his face a mixture of annoyance and weariness. He looked like a man who just wanted to get his plane in the air. Brenda immediately rushed to his side, whispering furtively in his ear. Her performance was worthy of an award, a concerned expression, worried glances back at the sisters, a hand gesture of exasperation. Captain Miller approached them, his expression now set in a grim, authoritative mask. Ladies, what seems to be the trouble? The trouble, Amara said, speaking for the first time in a voice that was cool and precise, is that your lead flight attendant is questioning the validity of our tickets and implying we don't belong in this cabin, for reasons I'm sure we can all guess. Now let's not make assumptions, the captain said dismissively. Brenda is one of our most senior attendants. She says there's a seating manifest issue and that you've become disruptive. Disruptive? Alani's laugh was sharp and humorless. We became disruptive when we asked for the service we're entitled to and refused to be treated like criminals. Mr. Abernathy in 2B cleared his throat loudly. Excuse me, Captain. I've been sitting right here. Your flight attendant has been needlessly antagonistic to these two young women from the moment they stepped on board. They have done absolutely nothing wrong. Brenda shot him a venomous glare. The captain ignored him. His focus was solely on de-escalating the situation in the fastest way possible, which in his mind meant removing the problem. Look, I don't have time for this, Captain Miller said, his patience gone. We have a departure slot to hit. Brenda feels the situation has escalated to a point where she can't ensure the safety and comfort of the cabin. I'm going to have to ask you to deplane. We can rebook you on the next flight. The words hung in the air, thick with disbelief. Rebook them, as if they were unruly children being sent to their room. The humiliation was a physical blow, to be paraded off the plane in front of the other passengers, who were now staring with a mixture of pity and discomfort. You're making a catastrophic mistake, Amara said, her voice devoid of emotion. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of a scientist predicting a chemical reaction. That's my decision to make, the captain said curtly. He gestured to another flight attendant. Please escort these passengers off the aircraft. As they gathered their bags, their faces burning with a shame they didn't deserve, Alani leaned close to Brenda. "You will regret this," she whispered, her voice a low promise. "I want your name, your full name." Brenda just smirked, a triumphant, ugly expression. "It's Brenda Fuller, and I'll be sure to note your threatening behavior in my report." Silently, the Sterling twins walked the long, lonely walk of shame down the aisle and off the jet bridge, leaving behind a cabin thick with tension and the lingering stench of bigotry. They emerged back into the bustling terminal, the sounds and lights suddenly harsh and jarring. For a moment they just stood there, stunned into silence. The surprise for their father was ruined. Their dignity had been stripped away in a public spectacle. The rage was a living thing inside Alani, but Amara was already processing, her brilliant mind shifting from the emotional to the strategic. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were perfectly steady. "Who are you calling?" Alani asked, her voice choked with fury. "The customer service line? A lawyer?" Amara looked at her sister, and for the first time that day, a small, cold smile touched her lips. It was a smile that would have terrified Brenda Fuller and Captain Robert Miller if they could have seen it. "No," Amara said. "We're not calling a lawyer. We're calling Dad." Marcus Sterling was in a board meeting in his London headquarters, a glass and steel testament to his success overlooking the Thames. It was a meeting about a multi-billion-dollar port acquisition, involving a dozen senior executives and a team of high-priced lawyers. When his private line buzzed, a sound no one in the room had heard in over a year, everyone froze. Marcus never took calls during these sessions. Ever. He glanced at the caller ID. Amara. His daughters knew the rules. They wouldn't call this line unless the sky was literally falling. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said, his voice a calm baritone that commanded instant obedience. He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, turning his back to the room. "Amara, is everything all right?" "Dad, we're fine. We're safe," Amara began, her voice controlled but underscored with a taut wire of fury. "But something has happened." Marcus listened, his expression unreadable, as Amara recounted the entire sordid affair. She left nothing out. Brenda's initial sneer, the denied champagne, the missing lime, the demand for their boarding passes, the false accusation of being disruptive, the captain's dismissiveness, and the final, crushing humiliation of being escorted off the plane. She was precise, factual, and devastatingly clear. He could hear Alani's muffled, angry sobs in the background. With every word, the view of London outside Marcus Sterling's window seemed to sharpen, the edges of the buildings growing harder. The air around him grew still and cold. The men in the boardroom watched his back, sensing a seismic shift in the atmosphere. Marcus Sterling was a famously placid man, a titan of industry who navigated corporate warfare with the detached calm of a chess grandmaster. They had seen him angry, but they had never seen the stillness that now possessed him. It was the calm at the eye of a hurricane. When Amara finished, there was a long pause. "What airline was this, honey?" Marcus asked, his voice deceptively soft. "Aura Wings, Flight 77 to Florence." Marcus closed his eyes. A single, almost imperceptible muscle twitched in his jaw. Aura Wings. The boutique airline that his primary investment vehicle, Orion Capital Group, had acquired just 6 months ago. The acquisition was part of a larger strategy to diversify into luxury consumer brands. He had installed a new CEO, Richard Davenport, a man known for his ruthless cost-cutting and obsession with brand optics. Marcus hadn't involved himself in the day-to-day operations. He trusted his executive team to manage the portfolio. He had, until this moment, viewed Aura Wings as little more than a promising asset on a balance sheet. Now, it was personal. "And the flight attendant's name?" "Brenda Fuller," Amara said. "The captain was Robert Miller." "Stay where you are," Marcus said, his voice now taking on a tone of chilling finality. "I'll send my local security team to you at JFK. They'll get you to a hotel. A private jet will be ready to take you to Florence in 3 hours. Don't speak to anyone from the airline. Don't answer any calls, do you understand?" Yes, Dad. I love you both. I will handle this. He hung up. He stood motionless for another 10 seconds, staring out at the city. Then he turned. The look on his face silenced the room more effectively than a shout. All the warmth was gone, replaced by a glacial fury that was terrifying to behold. "The meeting is over," he announced. "Stephen, stay. The rest of you, leave." The room cleared out in under a minute, executives and lawyers scurrying away from the palpable danger. Only Stephen Croft, the head of Orion Capital Group, remained, his face pale with apprehension. "Marcus, what is it?" Stephen asked. Marcus walked back to the table and sat down. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked at Stephen, his gaze so intense it was like a physical weight. "My daughters," Marcus began, his voice a low growl, "were just removed from a first-class cabin on Aura Wings Flight 77. Stephen's eyes widened. "What? Why? On what grounds?" Marcus relayed the story again, this time in clipped, brutal sentences. With each word, the color drained further from Stephen's face. He began to sweat. He knew Marcus Sterling not just as his boss, but as a man whose entire world revolved around his two brilliant daughters. He had built his empire for them, to protect them, to give them a world where they would never have to face the indignities he had endured as a young black man trying to make his way. "They touched my family, Stephen," Marcus said, the words as cold and hard as diamonds. "They put their hands on my daughter's dignity. Richard Davenport, the man we installed to run that airline, has allowed a culture of filth to fester in a company that bears our capital. He has allowed our investment to become a platform for cheap, ugly racism." "I'll call him immediately," Stephen stammered, fumbling for his phone. "I'll have that flight attendant and the captain fired before they land. We'll issue a public apology, compensate the girls." "No," Marcus cut him off, the word a blade. "You will do nothing of the sort. Apologies are insufficient. Terminations are a cosmetic solution to a systemic cancer. This is not about fixing a problem, Stephen. This is about cauterizing a wound. It's about sending a message that will echo from the baggage handlers to the boardrooms of every company we own." He leaned forward. "I want you to initiate the asset liquidation clause, the one tied to reputational risk and brand integrity." Stephen stared at him aghast. "The liquidation clause? Marcus, that's a nuke. That means grounding the entire fleet, canceling all flights and selling off the assets. It will shut down the airline, completely. We'll lose tens of millions." "I'm aware of what it means," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And the money is irrelevant. It is the cost of my daughter's tears. I would burn $1 billion to ashes to right this wrong. You hired Richard Davenport. You told me he was the best. Now you will call him. You will inform him that his primary investor, Orion Capital Group, has lost all confidence in his leadership and the operational integrity of Aura Wings. You will inform him that we are exercising our contractual right to dissolve the company, effective immediately. His golden parachute, his severance, is void. He oversaw a catastrophic failure of corporate governance. Let his lawyers argue with our lawyers. He will see none of it. And when you're done with him," Marcus continued, standing up, "I want a press release drafted. State that Orion Capital is shuttering Aura Wings due to a failure to meet the inviolable ethical and customer service standards of our group. No specifics, let the world wonder. The truth will find its way out." Stephen Croft was speechless. He had witnessed Marcus Sterling make ruthless business decisions, but this was different. This wasn't business. This was a father's retribution. It was swift, total, and terrifyingly absolute. "Do it now, Stephen," Marcus commanded, walking towards the door. As Stephen shakily dialed Richard Davenport's number, Marcus Sterling made a second call, this one to the head of his personal security. He arranged the jet, the hotel, the protection for his daughters. His voice was calm again, his instructions precise. He had compartmentalized the rage, channeling it into devastatingly effective action. He had built an empire to shield his children from the world's ugliness. Today the world had breached his walls. So, he would tear down a piece of that world and build a fortress on its ruins. Aura Wings had ceased to be an airline. It was now a lesson, and class was in session. Richard Davenport, the sleek, silver-haired CEO of Aura Wings, was having a spectacular morning. He was on the 18th green of an exclusive country club outside New York City, about to sink a 30-foot putt to win a $5,000 bet against a banking executive. His phone, held by his obsequious assistant, started buzzing. "Mr. Davenport, it's Stephen Croft from Orion Capital," the assistant said nervously. "He says it's an emergency." Davenport waved him off with an annoyed flick of his wrist. "Tell him I'm in a meeting. I'll call him back in 10. He lined up his putt, the picture of smug corporate confidence. "Sir, he says it cannot wait 10 seconds. With a theatrical sigh, Davenport took the phone. "Stephen, to what do I owe the pleasure? I'm about to fleece a banker, so make it quick," he chuckled. Stephen Croft's voice on the other end was cold and dead. "Richard, there's been an incident." "An incident? A little turbulence? Someone's gluten-free meal not up to snuff?" Davenport joked. "An incident on Flight 77 out of JFK this morning, involving 2 first-class passengers." Davenport felt a flicker of annoyance. A customer complaint? This was what Croft was calling him for? "Stephen, I have an entire department to handle that. Let them deal with it." "They can't, Richard, because the 2 passengers were Alani and Amara Sterling." The name Sterling didn't immediately register with Davenport. He knew Marcus Sterling, of course, the reclusive, silent titan behind Orion Capital, the man who owned his company. But he didn't know the names of his children. "And?" Davenport asked impatiently. "They are Marcus Sterling's daughters," Stephen said, the words landing like body blows. "And they were ejected from the flight by your crew." Richard Davenport froze. The expensive putter felt like a lead weight in his hand. The sun seemed to dim. He could hear the blood pounding in his ears. What did you say?" he stammered. Stephen quickly relayed the details he had gotten from Marcus. As he spoke, Davenport's world began to tilt on its axis. He saw his career, his multi-million-dollar salary, his stock options, his reputation, all of it circling a drain. "I'll fix this," Davenport said, his voice a desperate rasp. "I'll get on the phone right now. I'll fire the crew. I'll issue the most groveling apology in corporate history. I'll fly to Florence myself and beg for their forgiveness. We can contain this." "It's too late for containment, Richard," Stephen said, his voice flat. "This is not a damage control call. This is a notification." There was a pause. Notification of what? "As per Section 11B of our acquisition agreement, the reputational integrity clause, Orion Capital has lost all faith in the operational and ethical viability of Aura Wings under your leadership. We are exercising our right to dissolve the partnership and liquidate all assets, effective immediately." Davenport dropped the phone. It clattered onto the pristine green grass. The banking executive stared at him, forgotten. The CEO's face had gone a ghastly ashen color. Dissolve? Liquidate? It wasn't possible. It was a bluff. He snatched the phone back up. "You can't be serious. You'll destroy the company. You'll lose hundreds of millions." "The decision has already been made, Richard, by Marcus himself. The money is not a consideration. A press release is being drafted. Our legal team is filing the preliminary injunctions to ground the fleet, pending liquidation. Your services are no longer required. Your severance and bonus packages are voided under the gross negligence clause." The line went dead. Davenport stood there trembling, the jeers of his golfing partners fading into a dull roar. His empire was gone. Not in a month, not in a week. Now. The shockwave from Stephen Croft's call hit the Aura Wings corporate headquarters like an earthquake. The first tremor was an all-hands mandatory emergency video conference for senior executives, scheduled in 15 minutes. The second was a notification from the finance department that their primary credit lines from Orion-backed banks had been frozen. The third was a system-wide alert that the flight operations network was being remotely locked down by the parent company. Chaos erupted. Vice presidents were sprinting down hallways. Phones were ringing off the hook. No one knew what was happening, but it felt like the end of the world. On the emergency video call, a stony-faced Stephen Croft appeared on screen. Behind him stood a team of lawyers. Richard Davenport was conspicuously absent. Effective immediately, Croft announced, his voice echoing in conference rooms across the country. Aura Wings is ceasing all operations. All flights are to be grounded at their nearest safe destination. All future bookings are canceled. This is not a bankruptcy filing. This is a complete and total dissolution of the company, initiated by the principal holding group, Orion Capital. A tidal wave of shocked, panicked voices flooded the audio feed. "Why?" someone yelled. "What about our jobs? You can't just shut down an airline." Croft held up a hand for silence. The official reason is a catastrophic failure to meet the ethical and operational standards mandated by Orion Capital. All further questions should be directed to the liquidation team, who will be on site by the end of the day. Thank you for your service. The screen went black. The fallout was instantaneous and brutal. At airports across the globe, Aura Wings planes landing were met not by ground crews for their next leg, but by airport officials and liquidators. Passengers with tickets were stranded, told only that the airline had ceased to exist. The Aura Wings app went dark. The website was replaced with a single, stark legal notice. On Flight 77, somewhere over the Atlantic, Brenda Fuller was basking in the glow of her victory. She had put those two arrogant women in their place. She had asserted her authority. She was serving the remaining passengers with an extra-wide smile, feeling vindicated. Captain Miller, having filed his report on the disruptive passengers, was already thinking about his layover in Florence. They were blissfully unaware that they were flying a ghost plane for a ghost airline. They had no idea that their careers had ended the moment they forced two women off that flight. Their world had already been dismantled. They just hadn't received the memo yet. The call had been made. The mountains were not just moved. They were pulverized into dust, and the avalanche was just beginning to pick up speed. The first public inkling that something was wrong came not from a press release, but from the chaos erupting at airports. Social media lit up like a Christmas tree. Twitter, Threads, and TikTok were flooded with videos of stranded Aura Wings passengers, bewildered and angry, standing in front of dark check-in counters. The hashtag #AuraGrounded started trending within the hour. Speculation ran wild. Was it a massive computer failure? A hostile takeover? Terrorism? The financial news outlets were scrambling, but the corporate veil was tightly sealed. Orion Capital was famously tight-lipped, and the official statement, when it finally dropped, was a masterpiece of corporate ambiguity. For immediate release, Orion Capital Group announces dissolution of Aura Wings, New York, New York. Orion Capital Group today announced that it is exercising its contractual right to dissolve its subsidiary airline, Aura Wings, due to a failure to meet the inviolable ethical and customer service standards of the group. All operations will cease immediately as the company undergoes a swift and total liquidation of assets. Orion Capital is committed to ensuring its portfolio companies operate with the highest degree of integrity, and we will not hesitate to take decisive action when those standards are breached. The statement was so vague and so drastic that it only fueled the fire. Ethical standards, decisive action. It was like using a nuclear warhead to kill a fly. The business world was stunned. Why would a famously profit-driven firm like Orion incinerate a multi-million-dollar asset overnight? The truth began to leak out, as it always does. The source was a man in Seat 2B of Flight 77, Mr. Abernathy. After landing in Florence and hearing the news that the airline that had just flown him across the ocean no longer existed, he connected the dots. He was a retired journalist, and his old instincts kicked in. He contacted a former colleague, a well-known aviation reporter named Jessica Thorne at the Air Current. "Jessica," he said over a crackly line from his hotel, "I know why Aura Wings went down. I was there. I saw the iceberg that sank the Titanic." Abernathy's first-hand account was explosive. He described the entire incident in meticulous detail: the flight attendants' overt hostility, The baseless accusations, the calm dignity of the two young black women, and the captain's cowardly capitulation. He didn't know who the women were, but he described them as pure class, being treated like dirt. Jessica Thorne's article, published that evening, went viral. Titled, "The $10,000 Insult. Did One Racist Incident Ground an Entire Airline?" It laid out the sequence of events. The story was a Molotov cocktail thrown into the already raging fire of public speculation. Suddenly, everything made a terrifying kind of sense. The pieces clicked into place. The hashtag #OraGrounded was replaced by #Brenda Fuller, #Flight77, and #Sterling Sisters. Online sleuths, fueled by righteous indignation, got to work. Using passenger manifests leaked by disgruntled former Aurowings employees, they quickly identified the Sterling sisters. A quick search revealed who they were, not just wealthy young women, but a neurosurgeon and an astrophysicist. The narrative became even more potent. Two brilliant black women, pinnacles of their professions, had been treated like common criminals. Then came the final, earth-shattering connection. Someone linked Dr. Alani and Dr. Amara Sterling to their father, Marcus Sterling, the shadowy, powerful head of the very firm that owned the airline. The internet exploded. The story was no longer just about a racist incident. It was a modern-day epic of corporate karma. It was a tale of a father's wrath, of unimaginable power being used to deliver a swift and terrible justice. Memes flooded the web. Marcus Sterling as the Godfather, as a Jedi Master, as Thanos snapping his fingers and turning Aurowings to dust. He became a folk hero overnight. For Brenda Fuller and Captain Robert Miller, the landing in Florence was the beginning of their nightmare. They were met on the tarmac by grim-faced company representatives who weren't there to debrief them, but to serve them. They were handed termination papers and informed that their return flights were canceled. They were on their own. Brenda's name and photo, leaked from an internal company directory, were everywhere. She became the face of corporate bigotry, the airline Karen who had cost thousands of people their jobs. Her social media was flooded with vitriol. Her address was leaked. News vans parked outside her suburban home. She was a pariah. Captain Miller fared little better. The FAA launched an investigation into his decision to remove passengers without sufficient cause. His professional record was scrutinized. Other pilots spoke out, anonymously at first, about his reputation for arrogance and for always siding with his crew, right or wrong. His career was, for all intents and purposes, over. Richard Davenport, the disgraced CEO, went into hiding. His attempts to frame himself as a victim of a reckless parent company fell on deaf ears. An article in the Wall Street Journal detailed his bloated expense accounts and a culture of cronyism at Aurowings, painting a picture of a leader who was asleep at the wheel while a cancer of poor service and low morale metastasized beneath him. He had been so focused on the superficial gloss of the brand that he had neglected its core. The incident on Flight 77 wasn't an isolated event. It was the inevitable symptom of a deep-seated disease. The firestorm showed no signs of abating. It became a global conversation about race, power, and corporate responsibility. For Marcus Sterling, who watched from a distance, it was exactly what he intended. He hadn't sought the publicity, but he understood its power. He had wanted to send a message. Now, the entire world was listening. For Brenda Fuller, the world didn't just collapse. It dissolved into a waking nightmare from which she couldn't escape. After being abandoned in Florence, she managed to book a cramped, humiliating economy-class seat on a budget airline back to the United States. The journey was a 12-hour gauntlet of sideways glances and whispered conversations from people who recognized her from the news. The triumphant smirk she wore when the Sterling sisters were escorted off her plane was now a permanent mask of fear and haggard disbelief. She arrived home to find her quiet cul-de-sac transformed into a media circus. Reporters shouted questions as she scrambled from the taxi to her front door. "Is it true you were fired for racism? Do you have any regrets about destroying a company? How does it feel to be the most hated woman in America?" Inside, there was no refuge. Her husband, a mild-mannered accountant, looked at her not with sympathy, but with a mixture of fear and contempt. His firm's partners had called him, suggesting he take a leave of absence until the unfortunate publicity died down. Her son, a college freshman, called her in tears, saying he was being harassed on campus. Desperate to reclaim the narrative, Brenda agreed to an exclusive interview with a prime-time news program. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Sitting opposite a sharp, unforgiving journalist, Brenda attempted to portray herself as the victim. She spoke of her 30 years of dedicated service. She claimed the Sterling sisters had been aggressive and entitled. She insisted her actions were based on security protocols, not race. But her words were hollow, and her body language betrayed her. Under the bright lights of the studio, her feigned sincerity crumbled. The journalist presented her with her own social media history, a trail of questionable liked posts and shared articles that painted a clear picture of her prejudices. She was confronted with internal complaints filed against her by other crew members over the years for similar, though less dramatic, incidents. The final blow came when the journalist played a cell phone video, provided by none other than Mr. Abernathy, who had discreetly filmed part of the confrontation. The video clearly showed Amara and Alani's calm demeanor and Brenda's condescending, hostile tone. It captured her sneering the word dear. The public saw the truth with their own eyes. The interview was a public execution. The GoFundMe page her sister started for her wrongful termination was shut down after raising only $47, drowned in a sea of mocking comments. She was evicted from her home after the leaked address led to relentless harassment, making life untenable for her and her neighbors. Blacklisted by every airline in the world, her career was over. Her friends abandoned her. Her husband filed for divorce. Brenda Fuller, the woman who had wielded her minuscule power like a queen, was left with nothing. She had flown too close to the sun, and her wax wings, built from arrogance and prejudice, had melted, sending her plummeting back to an earth that no longer wanted her. Richard Davenport's karma was of a different, more refined cruelty. He wasn't subjected to public harassment, but to the silent, suffocating death of his professional life. He was a man whose entire identity was built on his reputation in the elite circles of corporate America. He was the CEO who gave keynote speeches, who graced the covers of business magazines, whose name opened doors. Now that name was poison. He tried to fight back, hiring a high-powered law firm to sue Orion Capital for wrongful termination and breach of contract. But Marcus Sterling's lawyers were a different breed. They were corporate assassins. They countersued Davenport for gross negligence and mismanagement, burying him in an avalanche of depositions and discovery requests. They produced a mountain of evidence showing that under his leadership, customer complaints had skyrocketed while employee morale had plummeted. The incident on Flight 77 was presented not as a one-off event, but as the predictable outcome of his failed leadership. He had created the environment where a Brenda Fuller could flourish. His legal battle drained his finances. His former colleagues and allies stopped taking his calls. Invitations to golf tournaments and charity galas dried up. He was ostracized, a pariah in the world he once ruled. When he was spotted by a photographer eating alone at a diner, a stark contrast to his usual haunts, the picture went viral with the caption, "The $1 million CEO who lost it all over a $10 insult." The ultimate indignity came a year later. Broke and desperate, he applied for a mid-level management position at a regional logistics company. He didn't realize until his final interview, when he was sitting across from the impassive head of the parent corporation, that he was applying for a job in one of Marcus Sterling's smaller companies. Marcus hadn't arranged it. The universe had simply provided the punchline. He was politely but firmly rejected. Richard Davenport's punishment wasn't poverty, it was irrelevance. He was forced to live out his days in the long, gray shadow of his own spectacular failure, a ghost haunting the edges of a world that had utterly and completely forgotten him. For a man defined by power and prestige, it was a fate worse than death. The karma wasn't just hard, it was poetic, precise, and absolute. A month later, The crisp autumn air of the Hudson Valley felt like a world away from the sterile chill of the JFK terminal where the nightmare had begun. The Sterling family was gathered in the library of Marcus's sprawling estate, a room paneled in rich mahogany and filled with the comforting scent of old books and wood smoke from the grand stone fireplace. Outside, the last of the afternoon sun painted the rolling hills in hues of gold and crimson. This room was Marcus's sanctuary, a fortress of quiet contemplation built against the noise of the world. For the first time since the incident, the silence felt like peace, not a prelude to another crisis. The public firestorm had finally begun to recede, leaving behind the scorched earth of a defunct airline and a global conversation that was still simmering. The names Brenda Fuller and Richard Davenport had become cautionary bywords in corporate culture, footnotes in a story that had ultimately become about the Sterling family. Tonight was about reclaiming their own narrative, not as public figures but as a family. Yet a subtle tension still lingered beneath the surface. The trauma of the event, though avenged, had left a scar. Alani, usually so vibrant and expressive, was quieter than normal, her gaze often drifting towards the dancing flames. Amara, whose composure had been their anchor, seemed to carry a new weight in her stillness, as if a fundamental equation in her understanding of the world had been proven irrevocably flawed. Marcus broke the silence, swirling a deep red Cabernet in his glass. His voice, when he spoke, was heavy with a pensive quality his daughters rarely heard. "I find myself thinking about my first big logistics contract," he began, his eyes fixed on the fire. "It was back in the 80s. I was younger than you two are now. I had the best proposal, the sharpest numbers, the most efficient plan. I was in a boardroom with 10 older white men, and I watched the contract be awarded to a competitor whose bid was 30% higher and half as competent." He took a slow sip of wine. "I asked the CEO afterward, a man named Henderson, why I lost. I was polite, deferential. He looked me right in the eye and said, 'Son, our clients just aren't comfortable with a man like you handling their assets. A man like me.'" He let the words hang in the air. Alani and Amara listened, knowing this was a rare glimpse into the furnace that had forged their father. "I never told you the details of those years," he continued. "I didn't want to burden you with my battles. I wanted to build a world for you where your only obstacles would be the limits of your own intellect and ambition, not the color of your skin. I built an empire to serve as your shield, and a month ago, at 30,000 feet, in a company that I owned, that shield failed. A woman named Brenda Fuller and a man named Robert Miller did to you what Henderson did to me 40 years ago. They told you that you didn't belong, and that," he said, his voice finally hardening with the cold fury they knew so well, "is a failure I could not let stand." He turned from the fire to look at them, his eyes filled with a raw paternal pain. "The public spectacle, shutting down the airline, I know it was brutal. It was a sledgehammer in a world that prefers scalpels. But I needed to do more than just fire them. I needed to salt the earth. I needed to make it clear that the world has changed, that the Hendersons and the Fullers can no longer hide their prejudice behind company policy or client comfort. I never wanted the publicity. I just wanted to right a wrong that felt generational." Alani finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "It's what I couldn't stop thinking about on that jet bridge. It wasn't just about the champagne or the seat. It was that feeling of absolute powerlessness. I can crack open a human skull and repair the most delicate parts of the brain, but I couldn't stop that woman from humiliating us. That feeling, it doesn't go away just because she was fired." "It was illogical," Amara added, her analytical mind finding solace in categorization. Her actions were a net negative from every possible angle. She degraded the customer experience, created a safety issue through conflict, and alienated other passengers. She acted against the interests of her employer and against her own self-interest. It was a catastrophic system failure, driven by a single irrational variable: bigotry. The entire event was an offense against reason. It was this: their shared pain expressed so differently yet stemming from the same wound that Marcus had been waiting to hear. He saw the hurt that still lingered behind his daughter's formidable strength. And that, he said, a new energy entering his voice, is why we can't let this be the end of the story. It is not enough to simply destroy something that is broken. The truest power, the only victory that matters, lies in building something better in its place. He stood and walked over to a large mahogany table, upon which lay a slim portfolio. He opened it, revealing schematics of aircraft, gate leases, and financial projections. The liquidation of Aura Wings is nearly complete, he explained, his tone shifting from paternal to strategic. The brand is toxic. The leadership was a cancer, but the physical assets, the planes, the hangars, the landing slots, are just metal and concrete. They are value neutral. I had Stephen Croft hold back the core assets, a fleet of 10 new generation Airbus A321 XLRs, the primary maintenance hangar at JFK, key landing slots at Heathrow, Charles de Gaulle, and yes, Florence. Alani and Amara exchanged a look of dawning comprehension. "Dad, what are you doing?" Alani asked, her voice a whisper. "I am going to build a new airline from the ashes of the old one," he declared, his eyes burning with conviction. "But this is not a vanity project. This is a corrective action. The collapse of Aura Wings put nearly 3,000 people out of work. The vast majority were good, hard-working people, pilots, mechanics, flight planners, gate agents who were failed by a rotten culture at the top. We have a responsibility to them." He laid his hands flat on the portfolio. "We will create a new entity, smaller, leaner, smarter, and it will be built on a single non-negotiable principle: excellence through inclusivity. We won't just have a diversity policy. It will be our entire business model. We will prove that a company that respects its employees and its customers, all of them, is not just more ethical, but more profitable, more efficient, and more resilient." He looked from Alani to Amara, his expression intense. "And this will not work without you. I don't want you to just be figureheads on a letterhead. I need your minds. I need you on the founding board of directors, as active partners in its creation." He pointed to Alani. "Lani, you understand the human brain. You know how people think, how they react, how bias is formed, and how it can be unformed. I don't want you to just approve an HR policy. I want you to design from the ground up the most advanced corporate culture and anti-bias training program in the world. Not just for the flight crews, for everyone. From the baggage handlers to the CEO. I want you to help build a company that is psychologically sound, where empathy is a key performance indicator." Then he turned to Amara. "Amara, you see the world in systems, in elegant interconnected patterns. You can find the hidden variables that cause catastrophic failure. I want you to architect the operational framework, design hiring systems that are truly blind to everything but merit. Create logistical models that are ruthlessly efficient but fundamentally fair. Use data to build a company that is as just and logical as the laws of physics you study. I can provide the capital, but you too, you will provide the soul." The audacity of the plan was staggering. It was a move that reframed the entire event, transforming an act of brutal retribution into a radical act of creation. It was a way to heal their own wounds by building a place where such wounds could not be inflicted. Alani's eyes lit up, the fire returning to them for the first time in weeks. A culture where de-escalation and emotional intelligence are valued as highly as technical skill, she mused, already seeing it. A system with transparent metrics for advancement, Amara added, her mind already charting the complex data flows. Where bias is designed out of the equation from the very beginning. "Exactly," Marcus said, a broad smile spreading across his face. "So what do we call it?" They spent the next hour brainstorming, energized and united. They wanted a name that reflected their family, their mission, and the future. It was Amara who finally landed on it. "Stellaris," she said quietly. "From stellar, meaning of the stars. And it contains sterling. It speaks of the highest quality, of navigation, of looking upward. Stellaris Air. It was perfect. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of focused, relentless creation. Stellaris Air was incorporated, and Marcus, true to his word, rehired over 500 of the most qualified former Aura Wings employees who passed a rigorous new vetting process. He offered them not just jobs, but ownership stakes in the new company. Alani took a sabbatical from the hospital, diving headfirst into her role. She brought in sociologists and psychologists to co-design a revolutionary training program called the Dignity Mandate. It was an immersive, scenario-based curriculum that went far beyond typical diversity seminars, teaching active listening, unconscious bias interruption, and conflict de-escalation with the same seriousness as safety protocols. Amara worked remotely with a team of data scientists and logistics experts. She designed a proprietary software for everything from crew scheduling to promotion reviews, building algorithms that actively flagged and counteracted potential biases. The result was an operational backbone that was not only hyper-efficient, but structurally equitable. 6 months to the day after the idea was born in their father's library, Stellaris Air's inaugural flight was ready for takeoff from JFK. The destination was, of course, Florence. The atmosphere at the new Stellaris gate was a world away from the cold pretension of the old Aura Wings lounge. It was bright, modern, and buzzing with a palpable sense of optimism. The crew, a diverse and genuinely smiling group of professionals, greeted every passenger with warmth. In the gleaming new first-class cabin, designed for comfort and accessibility rather than ostentatious bling, Alani and Amara Sterling took their seats, 1A and 1C. They weren't just passengers this time, they were the architects. Every detail, from the ergonomic design of the seats to the training of the flight attendant who offered them a pre-departure beverage with a sincere smile, was a testament to their vision. As the plane pushed back from the gate, the captain's voice came over the intercom. A warm, female voice that welcomed everyone aboard and spoke of the airline's commitment to making every passenger feel safe, respected, and valued. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, a powerful, graceful machine on a new heading. As it lifted into the boundless blue sky, Alani and Amara looked at each other. The lingering shadow of their humiliation was finally, completely gone, burned away by the bright sun of their own creation. They hadn't just gotten justice, they had redefined it. They hadn't just avenged a wrong, they had built a right. Looking out the window at the world unfolding below, they knew this wasn't an ending, it was a new horizon. So there you have it, a story that started with an act of ugly prejudice in a first-class cabin and ended with the creation of an entirely new company built on respect. The story of the Sterling sisters isn't just about the satisfying hard karma that befell Brenda Fuller and Richard Davenport. It's a powerful reminder that prejudice isn't just morally wrong. In a world of interconnected power and influence, it can be a catastrophic business decision. It shows us that true power isn't just the ability to tear something down, but the vision and strength to build something better from the wreckage. The world needs more stories of justice, not just of revenge. If this story of karmic justice and righteous creation moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories. Let us know in the comments what you think. Was Marcus Sterling's response justified? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening.